What was the crucial point at which public opinion turned in favor of the Expo 67 project after a rather lukewarm beginning?
It's difficult to pinpoint the thing, but I would say that the fact that the exhibition, the Expo, was obviously being built. You could see it from the road, and of course we had a huge campaign to show the progress and to tell people what we were doing, what we were achieving. But the fact that it would be built on time, in spite of the obvious difficulty of being on time, building the islands and building 850 buildings within 2 years, within 3 years, was already a demonstration that it was possible. And then for Canadians, who always doubt about our own abilities, for Canadians to suddenly see in the newspapers and in the magazines and on radio and on television from America that this would be a great exhibition, for the Americans to admit that it would be a great exhibition after the flop of the New York World's Fair, people sort of said, oh my God, maybe it's going to work. And it did. But I would say then that it's late 1966. Of course, we were at it since 1963, and for those 3 years it was turmoil.
Montreal and the fair's planners built Expo 67 in record time. What contributions did other Canadians outside of Quebec make to the tremendous success of Expo?
It's a much greater contribution than is usually recognized or spoken of. We had great designers who were from Canada, who participated very much in Expo. We had many politicians from the rest of Canada who worked very hard for Expo. I'm thinking particularly of Mitchell Sharp, who was a Torontonian. In my own shop, my deputy director advertising was Paul Brake, who did remarkable things in terms of advertising and publicized Expo. Ed Churchill, who was the man who built Expo, was a Manitoban. He was very remarkable. Let me see, within the group. No, I think that overall it was a remarkable Canadian achievement, and we forget that too often. There was a series done called the Canadian Experience, and it gave much credit to Quebec. I think more than Quebec deserved. It was not a Quebec show, it was really a Canadian show.
Perfect. The Montreal Metro subway proved to be a popular mode of moving visitors to and from Expo 67. What was your impression of this method of transportation? And could you also tell us how the excavation plans in building the Metro subway impacted on the creation of Expo 67?
Good questions. Being built on the St. Helens Island, the only way to St. Helens Island was the Jacques-Cartier Bridge. One of the first things that Bob Shaw, when he became Deputy Commissioner General, did was to reinforce the ramp to the bridge because it had a maximum of 15 tons that it could take, and obviously we were going to put in a lot more than that in terms of rocks to build the site. Then we knew that this would be one of the ways to come to Expo. Having a metro was absolutely extraordinary. Lucien Saunier, who was head of the executive committee at Montreal, but also who was on the executive committee at Expo, was there every week, worked very hard to get a line from Montreal to the island to Longueuil. But he didn't want to build a line just to Expo. He obviously wanted a line that would also go to Longueuil, but he didn't want to pay for the Longueuil extension. However, Longueuil said, okay, we'll do it. So that Longueuil participated in the cost of that. Well, obviously, if you have a metro line, that's the ideal way to get people to Expo. We knew that. The other important contribution of the Expo was that we're getting a hell of a lot of rock out of the entrails of Montreal, and to carry them to the Expo site was a colossal feat. It's 28 million tons of rock that you had to bring to the site, not only from the metro, but also from the bottom of the river. It's 3 times the quantity of rocks that was for the building of the Pyramid of Cheops, the largest pyramid of Egypt.
Wow. At one point, the trucks were 24 hours a day delivering rocks to,
huge trucks and carrying. So the cost, that was Montreal cost, by the way. It's not part of the Expo cost. It was part of the Expo cost, and the thing that they had to supply us with a site. But it gave us a site that did not have all the encumbrances of an urban site that you have to tear down houses and, a desert out of a thriving quartier. What else? Yes, part of that rock also came from the bottom of the river.
Okay.
We were looking for rock everywhere, and I think it was Desulde who finally came up with the cheapest method, and they said, how can you be so under cost? He said, it's simple. He said, we'll build a dike in the river, go to the bottom, take the water out, dynamite and get the bottom of the river loose, and then bring it up by truck, and it's on the site. And that's why you have a certain current at the foot of Habitat 67, where you see the river, which is going at that rate at about 12 knots, goes down into the river and comes out again. That creates a ripple or a move, a permanent wave. There's some surfers that use that nowadays.
That's great. Expo 67 officials expected an attendance of 30 million visitors. In the end, over 50 million visitors attended the World Exhibition. Was there a contingency plan and additional funding put aside prior to the opening of Expo 67 so as to provide the necessary amenities for a larger than expected turnout?
No. The figure of 30 million is easy to say, but it never happened before in North America. I mean, at that time, Disney World, which is in Anaheim, California, drew 22 million visitors a year, not 6 months, a year. And that was very, very large. To get 30 million visitors in 6 months in Montreal, we never thought that we'd go beyond that. We always kept some provision to whip up enthusiasm and get people in, because it would obviously fall short. But we didn't fall short. We went way beyond. And we just didn't wonder about that at all. Besides the 30 millions, it was an estimate that was given to us by the Stanford Research people of Chicago, who said that we might be getting 30 million visitors. That would be very optimistic if everything went well, if the FLQ didn't start bombing things, or that sort of problem. Yeah, so the site itself was built to accommodate 26 million people. To get 50 means double. Huh? It means that your toilets and the width of the streets and everything was half of what finally went through. But it worked. Those are problems of success, and it's much easier to solve problems of success than to have too many restaurants or too many things and to have people fail one after the other. But that, speaking of restaurants, I don't know if it's part of your questions, but we were not able to get any Canadian restaurants, Quebec restaurants, Montreal restaurants, to open on Expo.
Okay.
They all said no.
Okay.
We are not going to invest $100,000 and more into a thing that everybody says won't work.
Okay.
And two, for 6 months, you're out of your mind. It's only after we had the initial successes that the Saint-Hubert barbecue and all of the others came in and were very pushing it hard.
They came afterwards,
yes.
Saint-Hubert barbecue? Yeah. Okay, but still during 1967.
I can't guarantee that, but
okay.
I think that we had many takers, in other words, after.
Okay.
But mind you, there were many restaurants because of the pavilions, the French pavilion and the Belgian and all that, had very good restaurants.
What challenges did the volume of visitors at Expo 67 present?
Well, I just named a few challenges, the number of toilets and that sort of thing. You have to think of that, but we did not expect to have such a huge volume. I was telling you before that on the third day of Expo, we had over 550,000 people on the site. Well, that's a hell of a lot of people. And that's when you discover that your street furniture, the small waste paper basket next to the seat, were filled after 10 minutes after the opening, overflowing. And that's where the flexibility of Churchill's plans came into effect, because he was able to, without going to tenders and all that sort of crap that you have to go through when you're a government outfit, to have huge wire receptacles to take the garbage and double the crews for cleaning, so that the site would not be a mess of papers flying all over and what have you. Does that answer your question?
Perfect. Yeah. How important was Laronde's contribution to the overall success of Expo 67?
I think it was, because we were told that at Disneyland there were 4 adults for every child, but it's the child that brought them there. I mean, the adults don't go to Disneyland. I mean, your father, your mother doesn't go to Disneyland.
Yeah.
They'll go because they have kids.
Yeah.
So that to get the kids interested in Expo, to say that you have La Ronde is much more appealing than to say that you have, the discovery of the Earth at the Czech Pavilion and that sort of thing, because they'll go there and they'll see it and they'll be pleased and they'll learn, but they wanted to have fun, and La Ronde was it. But it was almost snuffed. During one of the executive committee meetings, Saunier, who represented the city of Montreal, said, no, we've got to sacrifice something. This is costing us much more than we thought, and I think we should kill La Ronde. Beaubien, who was our director of installations, exploitation in French, he was running the fair once a week. Said, no, Mr. Saunier, we can't do that because it's extremely important. What we are planning is something that's based on the Tivoli Gardens in Denmark. Have you ever seen it? And Saunier said, no. Beaubien said, okay, why don't we take a plane tonight and go to see Tivoli and come back instantly? Oh, tonight? Tomorrow? After tomorrow? Yeah, why not? So they jump on the plane, That was the kind of flexibility that we had to have and that we had. That's extraordinary. If you decide that let's go to Tivoli Gardens tomorrow morning with your dad, there's all sorts of good reasons why you couldn't go instantly, but he made it possible. So Saunier saw the Tivoli Gardens and said, okay, this is very nice. It's a great attraction. And okay, let's leave it at La Ronde. La Ronde was not a Tivoli Gardens. It was a mixture of Tivoli Gardens and something else. It did wonders. And we had counsel by Walt Disney, who told us that when you make a street and you have a small wall to prevent people from walking on the grass, is just low enough so that people can sit on it. While the kids are having a ride, parents will want to sit down somewhere, and that's a good place to sit. Disney gave us a lot of advice, like just make sure that the cleanliness of Expo is paramount. It's the most important thing that you can do once the fair is put on, so that everyone, no matter how important or unimportant they may be working at Expo, is aware that it's their job to pick up a cigarette butt or to pick up an apple core or to pick up an empty glass of something and put it in the proper receptacle. It's easy to do, but it's got to be done, and it should be done, and it must be done if you want a successful operation. Also, you must have the instant facilities to repair things. So we created what we called le comité des flaques, the puddle committee, with a single number that everyone had and knew. And if you're walking around at Expo and you suddenly see that The road has dipped a bit. Don't forget we were built on fill.
Yeah.
So that you make a road with asphalt and suddenly it dips a little and creates a puddle. People don't walk in puddles. They walk in flower beds. They'll walk anywhere but in puddles. So that you immediately call that number and the crew is instantly on its way to fill up that hole, that puddle. And in the night they'll finish it again with asphalt. But they'll do an instant job. If you see a light that's burned somewhere, or if you see a nail sticking out of a pole or something missing, broken, or in danger of being broken, you call that number and it's repaired instantly. That worked too, and it worked very well.
Music played an important part in Expo 67. Whose idea was it to pipe music throughout the site, and were there any problems getting this to work?
No, it's an easy solution to pipe in music. So that part was easy. I think it came out of Beaubien's shop. I don't know who exactly, but we wanted and we made sure that the exhibition was not an ordinary fair with a lot of circus music all around. It had a very serious theme. We decided to pipe in classical music, so that you'd have, it was especially astounding for the Americans to be munching their hot dogs with Vivaldi, Four Seasons in the background. But they liked it. They said, no, this is great. You're not, it's not ta-da, ta-da-da, ta-da-da type of thing. You have this soft flowing music while you're doing some very ordinary things. So that it played its role. It was well appreciated. The noise was very strictly controlled at Expo. There was no noisy places, except there's one that we forgot. It was the hovercraft.
Yeah.
And the damn thing would come in. Dupuis, our Commissioner General, was furious because very often happened during visits, and he was making speeches at the Place des Nations. It was a very formal affair. And you suddenly have this bloody thing coming by and making noises. And it would drown up the speeches, which was no loss, really, but he did not like that.
The Expo 67 theme song, Hey Friend, Say Friend, or Un Jour, received advance airplay prior to the official opening of Expo. The song's composer, Stéphane Venn, was criticized at the time for not including the words Montréal and Expo into the song's lyrics. In spite of these omissions, do you feel that Hey Friend, Say Friend, Un Jour, reached its intended listening audience in order to promote Expo?
It's funny that I never heard that criticism that Montreal or Expo was not mentioned. To me, it was a very lilting song. It was a very, ta-ra, ta-ra, ta-ta-ta-ra, sort of a trumpet call to come to Expo. And one thing that saddens me is that in my book, La Petite Histoire d'Expo 67, there is no mention of that song or of Stéphane Venn or of Marc Gélina's Amenez-moi la ronde. I completely forgot those two and maybe others. Well, Bobby Gimby, I think I mentioned, of the Canada, because they came to Expo. But the other one was there, and I completely forgot to mention them, and I'm sorry about that. But it was, I thought it was a very good song, and it played its role well.
What are your thoughts about Habitat 67? It was substantially scaled back from Safdie's original plans, and it never became the housing experiment he envisioned. But what are your thoughts on it?
It was one of our theme buildings. The idea was to demonstrate the feasibility of what is done, and it's till today a very desirable lodging unit. It would have been 4 times larger, and I don't know if it would have worked. We'll never know because it was never built afterwards. It was an interesting, very interesting piece. The main thing that I remember about it is that when we announced the scaling down of the thing, it made big news. On the same press conference day, we announced the Christian Pavilion, yes, and the coming in of the CN as an exhibitor. At the management meeting preceding that, I announced that the elements, and then Shaw, who exceptionally came into our management meeting, he was never there. It was the general manager who was there, said, oh yes, we have to add, it was December, we have to add an overall review of what happened in the year. I said, Bob, you can't do that, it's impossible. The habitat thing is big news. The Christian Pavilion is an important news, and the CN is the number 3 if you want on the list. I can't add number 4, and we won't have a press conference that will last 5 hours. Oh, he says, I promised, and it's got to be done. I said, Bob, it won't work. He said, it's got to be done. Okay, do it. So we did it. We started by announcing the Christian Pavilion, and then the CN, and then the habitat thing. Because immediately, when Breton and Dupuy left, the press left with them. And Churchill went to the microphone and started telling about the achievement of the year, and there was nobody left. He was livid. And we had there in that room dozens of model buildings of new things that I had never seen before. Would have been interesting for the press to get an inkling of what was coming. But no, they weren't awake. So Churchill was very mad and came with his paper and came to me and said, you know what went wrong? I said, yes. He said, so do I. He said, we hire guys like you to tell us what to do, and we tell you what to do. So that's wrong. He said, from that on, we became very fast friends, and I would get anything out of Churchill. And he just accepted my judgment on things. So that was, to me, a very important point in terms of the possibility of my being informed of what was going on so that you can pass on the information.
What pavilions at Expo 67 made the strongest impression on you, and why?
The Czech pavilion. It was not in itself an impressive pavilion, but its contents was remarkable. They had in there a manger in crèche made in wood, the 16th or 17th century, but that was working, like you see at the Ogilvy's at Christmas, but very elaborate. It had beautiful glass from Bohemia. It had designs. There was one, I don't remember the name of the what it was showing, but there were, I don't know, several hundred blocks of various pictures that would move forward and backwards. It was a marvel of informatique. Before informatique, it was mechanical. There were thousands of wires going to
computer controlled.
Yeah, but there was no computer. I mean, well, there must have been some kind of early computer. We're talking of 1963, 64, 65.
Yeah.
There was a Kiné Automat. I loved that little place. It was a small cinema, so showing a film, and around the screen there were green and red squares. There were 19 places when the film stopped and said, ask the audience, what does she do? Does she go in? Does he let her in? Does he not? If it's in, you say green. If it's not, you say red. So that you press a little button on your seat and the account appeared and the film would continue according to the wishes of the audience. Kiné Automat. It was remarkable. And again, before the computer, so today it would be very easy to do the same thing. But it worked very well. Many years later, I read in La Presse that there was a great thing that had just happened in New York, and there was an interactive film, and they thought it was absolutely extraordinary. I said, well, it is extraordinary, but we had that at Expo 67. It was fun. So the Czech pavilion was very good. I like British pavilion because I like British humor, and it was very humorous and light, and and there were more budgies than children in Great Britain, and the cows, and it's all sorts of funny little tidbits like that. The Commissioner General for Britain was Lieutenant General Sir William Oliver, I think his name was. A very distinguished gentleman with a twinkle in his eye, and really having fun doing all this. And of course, the stewardesses at the British Pavilion were the shortest, the mini skirts of Expo.
My father told me about that.
So that it was very popular. Germany was impressive. I loved France. France was a very nice pavilion. Canada was a bit rambling, but large, and then smaller ones. Australia was very impressive. It was the only pavilion that had white woolen carpeting all over. It's difficult to imagine that it would be effective. They had to replace the carpeting at mid because it was used by so many people.
Yeah.
The Belgian pavilion had very large stones, but having a pavilion with very large stones means that you had also a pavilion with many cigarette butts and pieces of paper and gum and what have you, which you did not have in the Australian pavilion. People don't throw gum on a rug or a cigarette or anything. So it was cleaner. When you entered the pavilion, there were brushes under your feet as you walked. It worked like that. And we had many people who came in bare feet so that you would have them jumping over.
That's great. The major usage of large multiple screen images and sounds was an exhilarating experience for movie audiences at Expo. One such film, A Place to Stand by Christopher Chapman, won an Oscar. Expo also introduced IMAX technology for the first time in a film entitled A Polar Life. Were you surprised at the popularity of these two films?
No, the Ontario one was remarkable. It was good fun. The IMAX thing, The Labyrinth, was very impressive. It instantly acquired a great reputation, and we had people waiting online for 4 hours, which is surprising because you don't go to Expo to an exhibition, stand 4 hours in one spot to wait for a film. The kineautomat was another phenomenon. I said that what was surprising was the small number that we could accommodate at Labyrinth and the patience with which people. But then we had some wandering minstrels singing and dancing and having fun to help the queues pass the time. And that's where your press pass was so extraordinarily valuable. Well, I told you, I got a phone call from a banker from Detroit who said, well, this is John Smith. I'm president of the First National Bank of Detroit, and I'd like to have a press pass. I said, I'm sorry, I thought you said you were a banker. He says, yes. Well, I said, you can't have a press pass. Well, he said, I'm told it's the only way you can see Expo. Well, I grant you that it's an easier way. But look, you're a banker. We have a bankers association exhibiting at Expo. Get in touch with them. They'll look after you. Oh, thank you. So that went well. And we had a couple of guys arrested because they had fabricated false press passes. It was a very important thing. And you go anywhere, you just went through the back door. Wow. And did not wait for hours to get in.
One of the cleverest public relations concepts at Expo 67 was the introduction of the Expo passport. Whose idea was it to have passports stamped at each pavilion?
You call it a public relations thing, and it should be my shop. But it wasn't my idea. Came in this little guy called Joe Heilig, I think it was from Toronto, who came to see Paul Brake, who was in my shop. He was my deputy director of advertising, and presented the Expo passport. And Paul was on the committee that was working on the admission system. And he brought the passport. We were wondering at that time, should it be a token made of glass, of steel, of nickel, or of this or of that, a piece of paper, admit one, and that you tear up. And you had to be careful not to be robbed blind by the people who would be selling these things and, pocketing the tokens and what have you. Yet to have something which would be original. The passport was an interesting idea, but it was considered one much too costly. It did not much costlier than simply stamping a piece of wood or a piece of metal. It was easy to counterfeit. It would take time. If you want to do it properly as a passport, then you need to have the photograph of the person, the name and address, and this and that, what have you. Time consuming. No, it was rejected. So they continued looking for it. And then passport came again. We said we can produce paper that would make it impossible to counterfeit. We can do this, we can do that. No, it was rejected again. Third time it came up, and okay, I looked at the other thing, but the passport, and gradually it made its way. And finally, people said, "Oh no, right. Well, how much would it cost?" And then of course, the process was on its way. It was a brilliant thing. I thought it came from Beaubien's shop. It came from Beaubien's shop because that's where Paul Brigg brought it. I was at the National Museums of Canada. Well, about 78 or 79, I think I was there. Yeah, I came back to Montreal in the 80s. And this guy comes along and shows me his portfolio because he wanted to do something for us. And one of the things he had in his portfolio was the passport. I said, "Well, what's that?" Well, it said, "The Expo passport." I said, "I know, but why is it there?" Well, he said, "It was I who brought it to Paul Brigg." Oh, Christ, I didn't know it. And there was this guy from Toronto. We were speaking of the contribution of other than Quebecers to Expo, and Joe Heilig and Paul Brigg, and then the group, and many people are involved in such decisions. But it was really a fantastic thing because it was fun to have. It also forced people, in a very gentle way, to visit pavilions that they would normally ignore. I mean, you go to an expo, you want to see Russia, you want to see the US, you want to see Canada, you want to see France, Britain. Who the hell cares about Cameroon and Haiti and Monaco and Jamaica, which are beautiful little pavilions, but you haven't got time. Except that you want to get as many goddamn stamps as you can, and you went to all of these places just to get it stamped. And just in Montreal, we had thousands of these people with their passport. There was a lady who came to see me inside with that expo. Oh, that's nice. So that was 10 years old. She shows me her passport. Every day, except one or two perhaps, every day she left home with 2 tickets, metro tickets, 25 cents in her pocket, and a small bag with a sandwich and an apple. And she spent the days at Expo alone. I don't know if people would leave their 10-year-old daughter alone for like that, but we had no regrettable incident. But she spent her youth discovering the world, exploring India and exploring this, exploring that.
Regarding Expo 67 memorabilia, do you have your own favorite mementos?
Yes. Too much, it becomes a junkie. I know that you have some.
Tons.
I saw one venerable old gentleman on the street here in the Plateau with a room full of ashtrays and cups and saucers as you have, and I'm worried that all of this will just go to the Miron dump one of these days because he'll die and his kids will say, "For Christ's sake, let's get rid of this fast." So that the eBay is a good invention.
Yeah, definitely.
A lot of people are selling their stuff, and it's good. But I would have liked to have some kind of what I call the House of Expo, where this material could be gathered in un exemplaire, and also to be a source of information. Where can one find this? Where can one find that? Is it the National Archives? Is it the Montreal Archives, which have nothing? Is it Quebec Archives? Is there something there? Is it individuals? Is it companies? We had a fantastic television film made for US, which was absolutely remarkable. We had Maurice Chevalier making a commercial for France, saying France is a great country. We have beautiful food, vacation, this and that, right here. If you can't come to France, come to Expo. We're there. And, we'll show you everything that we have to offer. Well, that's a fantastic commercial. Maurice Chevalier. It didn't cost us a cent for Maurice Chevalier. It cost us money to produce the film and to send it to the stations. We had James Mason, Murray Chevalier in front of the Eiffel Tower, of course. James Mason in front of the Big Ben, doing that for Britain. We had Georgie Jessel, who is not known very much here, but very well known in the United States. He was known as Mr. Israel, because he sold a lot of Israel bonds and what have you. He made, of course, the pitch for Israel. We had Olivia de Havilland doing a bit for Japan, because she was born there. Okay. It's a bit, tiré par les cheveux, but it worked. We had Victor Borge for Scandinavia. We had Ed Sullivan for the World Festival. Mm-hmm. And we were looking desperately, who do we have for the USSR? And we didn't have anybody. Yuri Gagarin, the first man to walk in space. It was, of course, in the time where both countries were fighting for domination of the space. So we speak to the Commissioner General of the USSR Pavilion. He agrees. 3 days later, our crew goes to the Red Place in Moscow. And we have Yuri Gagarin in full uniform make a commercial in Russian for the US television, with a voiceover, of course, and finishing in English, welcome to man and his world, and with a beautiful gold tooth shining with a smile. That was fantastic. That film does not exist. I have never found it. Okay. I have no idea where I could find it. There were hundreds of copies, because we took those films to the US, to the #1 television station of the target cities, like New York, like Chicago, Philadelphia, Boston, and all of those, and went to that station and said, we'd like to show these films once on your television station. I said, once? You're supposed to do it 12, 15 times? But we don't have the money. What do you mean? Well, it's a non-profit organization. It's not a commercial exhibition. It's this and that. That's all we can do. And we can't give it to #2 station either, because we don't have the money. Oh. Okay, leave it with us. It says we're, spending an awful lot of time and worry about Vietnam and about Cuba, and we don't give a damn about our northern neighbor. And you're good guys. All we have from you is there's a cold front coming from Canada. That's what we hear all the time. We'll leave it with us. So that we paid for our one appearance and left. And then the #2 station would call and say, hey, about us. Sorry, that's all we can do. Well, can we do it for free? Okay. So, sure. Yeah. So we had a fantastic exposure, because they were fantastic films. We don't have them anymore.
That's unfortunate.
And that's where the House of Expo would be useful, because it has to be somewhere. Yeah. In somebody's, attic. Yeah. And then you find it that's very valuable, and I'm sure that we'd find a way to pay for it if we got our hands on one of these things.
Make a DVD. Yeah. Expo 67 would be a highlight of any person's career. What are your most memorable moments from the experience?
There were so many. To get the Order of Canada at the end was good, but that was not during Expo, it was after. During Expo, the meeting of so many heads of state, from Princess Grace to the General de Gaulle to the Queen to Haile Selassie, is quite an experience. Several weeks before Expo opened, I was wandering around the site and marveling at the beauty of it. This unspoiled beauty, like a father with his virgin daughter being married in 2 weeks, and you have that brute getting on her. The public is going to be there and throw their hot dogs on the sun, do this and do that, write graffitis, and I was really worried that it would be spoiled, and it wasn't. It was a beautiful marriage of reason. They completed each other. They did well, and they looked after the site. I saw 2 little girls walking and sort of having fun and drinking their Coke, and one throws her cup on the lawn, and the other says, Go and pick that up. I don't want you to spoil our expo, not their expo, our expo. C'est notre expo, ramasse-ça, mais là-dedans. I said, no, the battle is won. If we get people to think it's their expo, that's the way to do it. There were hundreds of memorable things. One was another little girl sitting down on one of our, the lighting. We had a beacon of light that would shoot upwards, and it was reflected on a piece of metal that would spread the light down. It was indirect lighting. It was very good. It was during the day, so the thing was not lighted. The little girl was seated on this, and she was eating an apple, irradiating the pleasure, the joy of being there. She was so happy at just being there. That's, to me, having worked for 4 years to get people to come to Expo, to see how happy they were, how satisfied they were of all this, was a great moment.
How did the Vietnam War protests affect Expo 67?
Not noticeably. We had threats when the American President Johnson came to visit Expo that whoever raised the American flag would get a bullet through his heart or her heart. There was no shot fired, but the flag was raised not by the ordinary scout that usually did, but by the scoutmaster who was wearing a bulletproof vest. Excuse me. And then when the flag was unfurled, it had a large tear in it. Was it accidental or was that part of vandalism? You will never know. I have the photograph of that, by the way.
Okay.
Of the flag with the tear in the middle. There were small protests, but none that was striking enough to say that there were many. I guess there were some in Montreal, but that was not my concern.
Your comments from the Canadian experience indicated that Expo management rejected Ottawa's demands that President de Gaulle not be allowed to visit Expo after making his famous Vive le Québec libre speech. How much influence did Ottawa have over the running of Expo 67?
We were actually working under the tutelage of 3 governments, Ottawa, Quebec, and Montreal. And it was made clear that if we were given the responsibility of doing the thing, that we were going to do it and would not accept to be dictated by Ottawa, Quebec, or Montreal. The comments were always welcome. Anybody who was recommended for a job at Expo would be looked at with sympathy and understanding. We were not bound to take them because a senator or because the prime minister said, no, you must take that guy. Actually, we gained independence from these birds.
One remembers hearing about the peacenik demonstrations at the U.S. Pavilion. Can you recall any other points of tension beside the infamous de Gaulle comments?
At the outset, one of these sculptures in front of the USSR Pavilion was sprayed with red paint. And the chap was detained for an hour, perhaps, and set free. The sculpture was cleaned up, and that was it. There were not many. There were a few minor incidents, I suppose, but none that was reported or made an important point. There were no demonstrations. It was 11, from morning, noon, and night. People loved it, and they sort of lived in this atmosphere, which was a bit artificial. I mean, there were big conflicts going on, including the Vietnam War and all of those things, but it was not reflected so much at Expo.
There was a sense that Expo 67 was an oasis of hope during a time of conflict and revolution, i.e. the liberation movements in Africa, assassination of Che Guevara, Vietnam, growing separatist tensions in Quebec, etc. How was that environment created and maintained during such a tumultuous time?
I don't know how it was created. It was created by the very atmosphere of Expo. I was worried about the separatist movement. Don't forget we had bombs in 1963. One guy was killed in Westmount because they put bombs in the mailboxes. I knew that in my shop I had several of my information guys, my reporters, as we call them, to have separatist leanings. So I took them apart one day and I said, look, if Quebec ever becomes independent, it would look for ways to demonstrate what can be done in Quebec. We are demonstrating what can be done in Quebec. We have Expo 67. 50% of it is paid by the federal. Don't rock the goddamn boat. Do you know anybody who has intentions of creating dissension at Expo? Tell them to lay low, because it's not the way to do it. We're doing a fantastic job for Canada. We're doing a fantastic job for Quebec and for Montreal. Let's not start spitting in our soup. I don't know if that went through or if it helped, but I'm sure that it was not harmful to say so.
The City of Montreal's 30-day transit strike in late September is said to have resulted in the potential loss of 5 million Expo 67 visitors. Despite that, the final attendance figure for Expo 67 was 50,306,648, just shy of the 1900 Paris Fair record of 50,860,801 visitors.
Which fair was that?
The 1900 Paris Fair.
Oh, at the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, with the Eiffel Tower. What was the senior management team's reaction to the transit strike?
Oh, we were appalled. We said it's going to cost us an awful lot. And of course, the metro was the main entrance to the thing. The CN put on some special trains from the station to, I guess it was beneath the Ogilvy Flour Mills, the sign.
Okay.
There was a small station there, and taxis would carry the people, or they could walk there, or there were other means. Thousands of Montrealers offered transportation to people that they knew needed to go to Expo and took them there. We had enormous numbers of visitors. The lowest number of visitors was on a Monday. It was raining. It was cold. It was the day after Drapeau had announced that the Expo would continue as Terre des Hommes in 1968. And we had 97,000 people that day. So that it was the only day where we were below 100,000. It cost us a lot, but I can't say that it was a catastrophe. It demonstrated Montrealers' attachment to Expo, because they were visitors at Loge Expo that, sort of were taken to the site and off and what have you. Not special buses, the transportation, the metro. It was not only the metro, it was the whole transportation system. Anyway, it worked. We finally managed to survive. But it was mind you, before Expo, in what is called the interregne between the Bienvenue Carsley management of 1963 to the Dupuis Shaw group of late 1963. Jean-Claude Delorme was our legal counsel and secretary general. Was not too busy while making up our minds who's going to replace who. He got in touch with the union and said, we would like to get from you an agreement not to have a strike that would endanger Expo. We have very little time to do an enormous amount of work. We can't have, strikes because you're not allowed to smoke, strikes because you're in a strike because of this strike. And they all agreed. It was signed. It was totally respected. To the point where there was a strike at the Montreal harbor, but ships that were carrying Expo material from the various countries, pavilions being built and what have you, they were allowed to unload that material and take it to the site, in spite of the strike at that time. The metro strike, we have nothing to do with it. It's nothing directed at Expo. It's metro strike. But the guys who were operating the Expo Express, that was a free rail transportation on the site, were part of the Metro Union, but they were allowed to continue their work.
Okay.
So, it was really an extraordinary situation, which Apple would have liked to have for the building of the Olympic site, but didn't. They said, nah, thank you, no, no, not anymore. But we have to pay homage to the unions for respecting completely their arrangements.
The mini rail was originally intended to be operated by a concessionaire, but Expo management decided to maintain ownership and operations of this transit system. Interestingly, visitors were charged 50 cents a ride, and within 3 months, 7 million passengers rode the mini rail. That's a lot of cash. I'm wondering how much of the decision not to run the mini rail by a concessionaire was motivated by profit, or was management motivated by another factor, that Expo was playing host to the first International Congress on Transportation?
Don't remember this Congress on Transportation. The fact that the mini rails were automated and did not have a single accident, it was not very costly, family. We did not have people jumping out of the cars. We did not have cars bumping into each other. They were at a reasonable distance one from another.
Mhm.
They did the job well. I was not aware that it was ever put to us that it should be operated as a concession. It would have
Okay.
been a very profitable concession.
Yeah,
But all we needed were a couple of guys at each platform,
yeah.
guiding people and saying, okay, we're leaving. But it worked well.
It still operates at Laron today. They still have a mini rail.
Yes.
Yeah, they do.
I know that mini rail comes from the 1964 National Exhibition at Lausanne in Switzerland.
Okay.
We got it complete, including the Saint Rano ads that were on it. That was one thing that we brought from Lausanne, and many, many very good ideas that we put into operation. We learned an awful lot at Lausanne, and we learned an awful lot at New York, but mostly what not to do.
Yeah.
Including the Expo Express.
Yeah.
At New York, transportation of people was on buses, and buses were mingled with the walking crowds, and it's, stupid.
Yeah.
We had our own right of way, and the transportation by the Expo Express were many millions of visitors free, but it worked very well.
An interesting fact vis-a-vis Expo 67 are the ways in which visitors intervened and subverted the official ways that the site was to be used and navigated. For example, new footpaths were cut through the grass daily as people choreographed their own trajectories through the site. Can you think of any other instances where the official narratives or ways of using and moving through the space of Expo were subverted by the activities of its users?
One way which immediately comes to mind is the opposite, that people did not use certain pathways that we expected to be used. For instance, these huge electronic signs that would say that at 3 o'clock there will be so and so, what have you, were placed where people would be going, but were placed beforehand at places where people did not go. They were very costly. They were costly to operate also, needed personnel, were often on the blink. Provided information saying, like, let's say it's 2:30, so that it said at 3 o'clock there's so and so that's going on. At 3 o'clock also there's such and such going on at that place. At this and that. It took a few seconds for this message to appear, to be read, and to be taken off. So that if you wanted to get some information from those signs, you had to sit there for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. It's an awful long time for people to be standing to wait for this information to come, which is not necessarily what you're looking for.
Yeah.
It only came to me after a while that much simpler, far less expensive, was to do what they have in Paris. It's called the colonne Maurice. It's a large column on which there's a large sheet of paper that says all of the theatrical events of the day. We do that, print every day, pardon me, a large piece of paper, stick it on there, so that it's you're there at 11 o'clock in the morning and you look at what's going on at 11, 12, 1, 2, it takes you a minute to do the whole thing.
The whole day.
then you decide what you're going to do. If you have a change in the middle, it's simple enough to print a piece of paper and stick it on. You have 10 of these things on the site, nothing at all.
Yeah.
No problem, no cost, what have you. The other one cost hundreds of thousands of dollars for each of these panels. To run the goddamn thing, we had a huge computer on a special floor with springs and special heating and special this, which had less power than an Apple II Plus in 1980.
Yeah.
It was very cumbersome. It was like the first UNIVAC. Was it called UNIVAC? I think the first computer, I think, was called something like UNIVAC.
I'm not sure.
And it had 70,000 radio lamps. It had a crew of 17 just walking along replacing burnt lamps.
Took rooms. Yeah.
And you have that in the watch today.
Yeah. As director of public relations, what kind of budget were you given to promote Expo? Did you come in on budget or did you go over it? What was your most successful marketing strategy?
When I joined with great enthusiasm and didn't ask questions. And I said, I'm going, I go. So I meet with Shaw and Neil Arthur, and I said, well, okay, what's up? Well, they said, you have a $5 million budget. I said, per year? I said, no, for the duration. And $1 million is already gone because that's 1964. So 63 to 64, $1 million was gone. I said, you want me to sell Expo, which is a totally unknown concept, to the world? $4 million? Oh, yes, but that's not advertising money. That also comprises of salaries, administration costs, what have you. I said, Christ, you should have told me that a fortnight ago. I would have said, no, it's ridiculous. Well, he says, we can give you an extra $6 million. We take this out of Beaubien's budget, we do this, we do that. We can give you 12. I mean, 12, excluding the $1 million that's already gone. So we have a $12 million budget. But we also get the assurance that the Canadian government, Quebec government, Montreal, is going to do, they're putting all of their resources at the service of Expo, the National Film Board, Radio Canada, the CBC, this and that, and what have you. All of these people are working for Expo, so you can draw on these forces. And I said, anyway, it's too late for me to back down. I'll do it. So we worked at it, what have you. And in 1966, there was a film that came out that said, the Russians are coming. It was a small film about a Russian sub that suddenly short of something and stops in a main port and refuels or something like that. And, the Russians everybody gets very excited, but nothing happens. It finishes well. Time magazine wrote a piece which they entitled, The Americans Aren't Coming, The Americans Aren't Coming. It says, Expo 67 is unknown in the US. They don't know what the hell it is. The New York World's Fair was a flop. And, what are you doing to get the Americans interested? That, of course, made Ottawa very nervous because the investment was important. It was many, hundreds of millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. We're not getting anybody from the US. And when you say that we're working at a 500-mile radius of Montreal, think of a circle. In the north, in the middle, you cut it in pieces. Why? In the middle, you have a line that's north of Montreal. There's nothing. Yeah. I mean, there's a few thousand people living in Val d'Or, and that's the farthest away. If you look at the east, there's the Maritimes and Quebec City, and no great shakes in terms of population. If you look to the west, then you have, of course, Toronto, and as far as Vancouver, would people come from Vancouver to Expo or something else? But Toronto, yes, even though we're getting bad publicity, but, let's say Toronto and Ottawa. So it's the South that you have to look at. On the South is the US. The Americans aren't coming, so what are we going to do? So Ottawa was very nervous. Neil Arthur, our general manager, said, what are you going to do with what you have left? I don't remember what it was. I said, this is our plan. And so it was careful, but we're spending a few $1 million, but not much. Going back to before Expo, the Public Relations Society and the advertising people were brought together once by Cecil Carsley, who was the Deputy Commissioner General of Expo 67 prior to Digby Shaw. And Carsley gave us a speech and said that, I don't know if you guys are aware of the importance of Expo. Maybe not, but he says our advertising budget will probably be in the neighborhood of $1 million. So Robert Prévost, who was head of the tourism office in Quebec City, he said, Mr. Carsley, I don't want to dampen your enthusiasm, but we, the Quebec Tourist Bureau, have a very small budget of $2.5 million, which we spend in the northeast area of the United States, and it causes barely a ripple. So to promote Expo, to make it really work, you need 10 times that amount, at least 5 times that amount. So you're talking of $12 million at the outset. Oh. So we had a few pennies left out of our $12 million, and we sort of said, this is what we'll do. But it said, what would you do if you had more? Oh, then we'd have our campaign, James Mason and Maurice Chevalier and all that.
Mm-hmm.
We'd do this, we'd do that. We have Expo, we have that. Anyway, we had an interesting plan. Oh. So we took that to Winters, who was then our minister. Anyway, he said, okay. So I got $9 million more. With that, we were able to put on some fireworks, and it worked well. But it was touch and go. If they had said no, because they were afraid of the amount of money that was being spent, it was a considerable amount. And the returns were not easy to measure. The prestige is not something that you can measure.
Mm-hmm.
The culture is not something you can measure.
Mm-hmm.
The educational value of Expo 67 is not something you can measure, or you can measure in terms of dollars and cents. So it costs $200 million to do, brings back what? So we have to make out finally what is known as a deficit of Expo is the difference between the cost and the tickets sold and the rights sold to this and what have you, so that we have a deficit of $200 million. But one of the things that we brought were tourists. The tourism dollars of 1966 were 600 million. The tourism dollars of 1967 were over $1 billion. So that only that $400 million more than covers the cost of Expo.
Yeah.
More than covers. And tourism dollars, according to economists, should be multiplied by 7.
Okay.
We don't have to multiply it by 7 and still make money out of Expo.
Robert Shaw described Expo 67 as Canada's happiest hour. The city of Toronto is attempting to drum up support to host the World's Fair in 2015. Do you personally feel that it is time for Canada to host another international exhibition? And if so, what advice would you give to Toronto organizers?
I don't know what advice I would give them. It would be interesting to look at what they're planning and get their thoughts, and perhaps bring some cold shower some of those and give them some new ones.
I have some links, I can send them to you.
2015.
Yeah.
You see, that's what, 9 years from now?
Mm-hmm.
I'm already very old, and to think of 9 years from now, I don't know how well the advice of a very old, frail gentleman would be, but I'm sure that I would bring them some damn good ideas if I was asked. Is Toronto ready for that? I think that Montreal would give them full support, which we did not have from Toronto, by the way, in those days. Times have changed, and Montreal is not interested in doing it, I gather. We have the site.
I don't think they can. Can they do it twice?
Yes, no problem.
Yeah, they could?
Yeah. Okay. It had to be 15 years later, which was more than enough.
Yeah.
Paris has done it many times.
Yeah.
But mind you, that was before the BIE. I don't know when I have to think about other countries. How would they do it?
New York had it twice.
Toronto. Interesting.
There is a sense of melancholy that occurs when walking around the Expo site today. One feels at times that the grounds point to a future that never was, but which many wished could have been. Have you visited the site any time after Expo closed? And what are your comments and reflections on the site?
Yeah, it is sad. What I think is missing at the Expo site, well, one, it's underutilized. I think that some memento of this is where the USSR pavilion was, this is where the Czech pavilion was, this is where the Italian, that would be a useful thing, and it's not done.
Mm-hmm.
I go often on this thing because I have some connection in the sense that we talk with the administration of the Parc Jean Drapeau. Yeah, you look at La Place des Nations, reminds one of the Nuremberg rallies of Adolf Hitler. You know, ruins, it's huge cement things that do not mean much. What can be done with it, I don't know, but I don't think that much is being cared for. They don't seem to show very much interest. Anyway, that's part of the game, I suppose. What does the site of the 1958 exhibition in Brussels look like today? I went to Seville a few years back, the 1992 exhibition. There are some very nice pavilions that are still standing and used. Maybe somebody learned from Expo that to build for 6 months is folly. The French pavilion was built to last longer, and it does last longer. The Quebec pavilion too. Is it much more costly? I think it is. But you'd want to determine in advance what you would like countries to leave, and you'd be able to remind the countries that are offered to participate that they can leave a lasting monument to the Toronto exhibition if they came to the Toronto exhibition, rather than spend $3 million to build a piece of cardboard, spend $5 million to have the goddamn thing stay for a while, even if it's smaller. It's not as elaborate, it's not as flashy, it's not cardboard, it's not celluloid, it's not neon signs, but it's something that remains. You leave that as a contribution of Germany to Canada.
All over Canada, the centennial building projects are being dismantled and torn down. Architectural heritage is not a primary concern in this country. While we know that Expo 67 was a temporary event, what should Canadians do to ensure that Expo 67 endures in a meaningful way? More museum exhibitions, publications, or something else?
Well, my own contribution would be the House of Expo. But it's a bit beyond my strength to fight for something which does not interest many people. I mean, you have idealist fools like yourself who pick up what is considered by many to be junk. It's souvenirs of Expo, it's the eBay, it's the books. There are many contributions of Expo that would be nice to keep. My House of Expo would be not only the object, but also when you can't get the object or when you don't have the space to take, where is the goddamn thing would be an interesting contribution. And with computers today, it's easy. There was an exhibition put together by the Biosphere for the 35th anniversary of Expo. They found one car of the mini rail in a dump somewhere, and they sort of cleaned it up and put up. I don't know where it is now. Did they put it back in the dump, or they have it in the cellar somewhere? I don't necessarily want it, but I'd like to be able to tell somebody who said, I'd like to put up an exhibition on Expo. We have this car, we have that sign, we have this other thing, panels that they found in the garbage again, in the garbage dump. Those panels exist. Where have they been after their exposition? There were many other exhibits that were done on Expo. Where is that material? I don't know. And when you call, let's say, what is that called, La Place des Jardins, where they had an exhibition, to whom do you speak? Who would know where the material that they used 10 years ago, where's that now? That nobody knows. So that would be a contribution, would be that kind of thing, the Maison de l'Expo, the House of Expo. And not only of Expo 67, by the way, of other pieces, information about other exhibitions, like I have when I went to the Expo 2000 at Hanover, when I went to the Seville 10th anniversary manifestation in 2002, and other bits and pieces that you gather. I even have, I thought I brought it with me, I even have strange objects. I have a nice pen that says Expo 2010 in Korea. It's a piece of promotional material to get the Expo 2010 in Korea that was given to Shanghai. But it's an interesting thing to see that Expo. I have one also in Poland. Poland 2010.
Okay.
They were also. Mexico was another one who made a bid for it. Okay. There was a very funny piece on the Korean presentation. They showed a sort of a plan of the Expo. In the middle, there's a large lake. In the middle of that large lake, there's a golden frigate, 17th century frigate. So I looked at this thing. I said, "Is that gold?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Aren't you afraid of having it taken?" He said, "No." But I said, "You're not there all the time." "No." I said, "Take it. If you take it and put it in your pocket and go with it, it's okay." I don't understand. What do you mean? He says, "Take it. It's right there." So my hand goes through it.
Okay.
It's a projection.
Okay.
Okay. It doesn't look like a projection. It looks like the guy, real thing.
Okay.
It's as real as that thing there.
Okay.
So you put your hand and you go right through. That's the kind of funny thing that you get at exhibitions.
What kind of impact do you think Expo 67 made on the Bureau of International Exposition, the BIE's image?
I think it made a very strong. It was the first exhibition after the 1958 Brussels exhibition. So the BIE was, in the words of Robert Moses of New York, a hole in the wall in Paris. He paid no attention to the BIE, or it was no bullshit. But it was the BIE who allowed the USSR to tell Robert Moses that they were not going to the New York World's Fair, but that they would be coming to the Montreal exhibition, which, of course, to any American is absolutely shocking to think that you'd say no to New York and yes to Montreal 3 years later. You're out of your goddamn mind. Well, that was the BIE. The USSR signed the BIE thing. Mind you, Spain signed the BIE thing, but they were at New York and had a beautiful exhibit and didn't come to Montreal. It's okay with anybody.
Do you know why not?
Huh? Well, because they didn't want to do 2 exhibitions at 3 years succession. It's very expensive, So that they decided that they would not come to Montreal, but they went to New York and they had a beautiful exhibit. So that the Montreal thing gave a certain impetus to the BIE, and people suddenly discovered that it was, after all, something that we could rely on. In 1964, I think it was, and Drapo went to make, it was before that. When he first went to the BIE, or the second or third time, he was heading a delegation in Paris and said to the people he was with that let's go and say hello to Mr. Baretti, who was the head of the BIE on the Rue Victor Hugo. And Mr. Baretti was a venerable old gentleman who received guests. that you'll wait for a few minutes, and then there's somebody, but Mr. Baretti will receive you. Then so they waited, and then out came Baretti, three very large Japanese guys, and large Japanese guys are not very frequent. But these guys came out, walked away. Baretti received his guest, and yes, what now? Well, we just wanted to say hello. We were passing by, and we thought that we'd say hello and see how our things are going, because the Montreal proposition was in the air. And he said, the three gentlemen that you saw going out of here are from Japan, and they want the exhibition for 1967. And I said, no, because it's given, we'll give it to Montreal. We'll be giving it to Montreal. Had the decision been taken? I don't remember. But anyway, 67 was originally Russia for the 50th anniversary of the revolution, and then Montreal for the 100th anniversary of Canada. There's no reason why Japan would want it in 67. Said, besides, if you want to have an exhibition, do one in 1970, according to the BIE rules, because you're on a totally different continent, you can do it 3 years afterwards. So they decided to do the Osaka exhibition in 1970. But on that day, they were asking Baretti to bring the thing back. So you see, the BIE was already playing a very important role. And they were very useful to us because they came to Canada and visited Canada and suddenly made Canadians aware that the exhibition was not just a Montreal fair. It was something international. And the funny incident was this Romanian or Bulgarian delegate who went to a Toronto dinner. Suddenly the chairman got up and says, ladies and gentlemen, the Queen. And he took a glass of water and he said, in our country, with anybody, if you drink a glass of water that says your health, Jason, and drink it, we are enemies for life, and our grandchildren will still be killing each other on the street because of this insult. So he said, I knew that there were many people in Canada who were anti-monarchist, but to have an official dinner with somebody saying the Queen with a glass of water, to me, I just stood there, and everybody sort of got up and drank their water and were very happy. But the BIE was being shown around, and they were very pleased to be so recognized, and of course it helped to their own prestige.
What projects were you involved with after Expo 67?
None really very significant. I formed a small public relations shop, and it did well. And after a few years, I was asked to be vice president of Air Canada. I made the same mistake of not finding out first what was entailed. A few months before, I was asked by Saunier. Saunier was the chairman of the Executive Montreal Executive Committee, and he was also very much involved with Expo, and we really got along fine, played golf together, and a really likable guy. Anyway, we liked each other. One day he said, Yves says, I've been asked to be chairman of Air Canada. I said, wow. Yeah. I said, will you come with me? I said, like a shot. He said, I'm not sure yet. I said, why the hell not? It's a blah, blah, blah. And I tried to sell something. He says, yes, but there's elections coming up. And many, many things that we did, Drapeau and I, are not necessarily popular with the population. I'd hate to see Drapeau carrying the ball by himself. For his sake, I think that he deserves to be re-elected, but I think I have to stay. And I don't know if Ottawa will accept to wait a few months. And Ottawa did not accept to wait a few months. So that he had to bow out. And the job was given to a Quebec City lawyer. So we were at couteau tiré. There was no. After a while, I said, wake up in the morning and shave and look at myself in the mirror. So I can't stay here for another 5 years, 10 years before I retire. Anyway, so that was that. And then went back to private practice and went to the National Museums of Canada. went back to private practice and now retired. But nothing was as exciting or satisfying or as well. You're endowed with immense responsibility, but the autonomy to do it. And, the respect of your boss that you're making the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
If you make the wrong decision, it's your goddamn head.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not being forced by a minister somewhere or a deputy or a mayor to do things that I don't want to do. It's my decision and I do it. There are not many jobs like that.
Expo 67 closed on October 29th. A few months later, you were made an Officer of the Order of Canada for your contribution to Centennial Year as Director of Public Relations for the Canadian Company for the World Exhibition. You were appointed on December 22nd, 1967, and the investiture took place on April 26, 1968. Do you recall what your reaction was to the appointment and your thoughts on the day of the actual investiture?
Well, we were elated. Mind you, the Order of Canada then was created in July of 1967. And we were not made officers of the Order of Canada. We got the Medal of Service, MS. And of course, to say Yves Jasmin, MS is maladie transmise sexuellement, MTS. MS is multiple sclerosis.
Yeah.
And médaille de service. Anyway, I didn't think it was very, very glorious. But then they changed that to make it 3 levels. There was a companion, the officer, and the member. We were made officers of the Order of Canada. But I still have the original little miniature medal of médaille de service, and my certificate calls it médaille de service.
Wow.
But anyway, that was a great honor. I also had as an honor, which was very particular, it was the Public Relations Society of America main greatest recognition is the Golden Anvil. And I was the first, and I think I'm still the only non-American who ever got this Medal of Service for it. I got that. And then, of course, the Canadian Public Relations gave me a piece of brass, which is that big, probably worth a lot of money just by weight.
At the time, Expo 67 transformed Montreal and Canada. What do you believe is Expo 67's legacy?
Thousands of people who remember it so fondly as you do, because they were there, and you are still amazed at what it is. That is a contribution. There were many physical contributions. The main physical contribution would be the legacy. We created many, many industries. We discovered while preparing for Expo that our slaughterhouses would not be accepted by our own inspectors. We had to import our meat from Ontario or other provinces or the US. Why don't we do it here? To do it here, we need to do that. And we spoke to these people, and they made the arrangements to have proper slaughterhouses to provide us with the meat that we needed. We had design firms that we told, we can't accept what you're doing because it's substandard. What you need to do is to do this. They did it. So we created Alliance Atlantis was born out of the Greenberg thing. They had a small laboratory where they would process the film that were produced at Expo. So they would produce slides that they would sell at Expo. They would do this, they would do that. Christ, it's a peanut shop compared to Alliance Atlantis and the Greenberg Empire.
Mm-hmm.
We created the Greenberg. We told them that you need to do this, you need to do that, and everything. Roger Blais, a friend of mine since we worked together at l'Office National du Film in Ottawa, came to Expo. I never met him during our stay, but we'd see each other often now. He worked for Colonel Churchill. He was in charge of the film at Expo. There were 5,000 films shown at Expo.
Mm-hmm.
Some were 10 minutes, others were 2 hours. You had loops. a film that goes on forever.
Continuously. Yeah.
You have to have very special celluloid base to run for many hours, let alone for days, let alone for months.
Mm-hmm.
He had this base created for Expo 67.
Wow.
Lamps for those goddamn things would last for many hours, maybe a couple of days, but not for 6 months. He had lamps created for this. Those were lasting contributions, which are not necessarily associated to Expo,
Mm-hmm.
but they were made there because we wanted it. And we asked for it, and they said the cost of not having it means that we will not be dealing with you. You'll be processing tons of material, thousands of things. If you don't do this, you'll get nothing. It was a strong incentive, and that's a lasting contribution.
Mr. Yves Jasmin, thank you for your time and for your generous responses regarding Expo 67.
Thank you. But there's one question that I did not answer.
Okay.
Is how we got such varied people as Beaubien, Delorme, Churchill, Rediker, Jasmin, Niewasser, Shaw, Dupuis. How did these people come together? We got together because, let's say it started with Dupuis and Shaw. Dupuis made sure that he got his chief architect, who was Edouard Fizet. They knew each other, and Dupuis and Fizet worked together beautifully. Anyway, Shaw wanted Churchill. He worked with him for the Jew line. He said he's a great guy. He's a doer. He's pugnacious as a bulldog. He gets to steal on something, and that's the way it goes. So he went to Ottawa, and Churchill said yes, but the boss of Churchill said no way. But finally, Churchill came. Rediker was already of the first administration, so that's okay. And he stayed. Delorme, who was general counsel and the secretary general, was at the first administration and did a good job, so he stayed. Shaw was looking for a director of operations, and that was Beaubien, Philippe Gaspé Beaubien. And there's a judge he met somewhere who said, there's this guy Beaubien, who's very interesting, bright, young, energetic, Harvard trained, and he'll do a good job for you. So he meets Beaubien, who said, I have just accepted a deal to make aluminum eaves or to do things. He was selling French fried potatoes at that time, chips. So Shaw said, leave it to me. He phones the other guy who just made a deal with Beaubien. The other guy said, okay, I'll let him go and no cost. So that Beaubien was free and he came to it. Niewasser was looking for a guy for exhibitors. Thought of many people. Thought of Pierre Elliott Trudeau. Was then, I think, a backbencher in Ottawa. I'm not sure of that, what Trudeau was at that time. Anyway, he thought of him and then said, no, that's not possible. After all, he's already involved. His wife had worked with Pierre de Bellefeuille at Le Droit in Ottawa. He said, Pierre might be a good guy. He phoned Pierre, and Pierre said yes, and Pierre got in. And then they wanted a director of public relations, and Drapeau said, the guy you need is Jasmin. Normally, when the politician said, the guy you need is so-and-so, check the guy and say, oh, thank you very much, don't call us, we'll call you. Because, already he's tainted. But they accepted me, and that's how we got together. And then we started getting together closer. Niewasser creating a thing called Les Durs, the tough one. A bit pretentious, but anyway. Every Wednesday night, we would have dinner at his or her place, all over the place. We're trying to, for a bond, if you wish. Then we discuss things. As we are talking about it, I just have thought that if we did this, we did that, and then people would bounce back, and yeah, okay, it's a good idea. But anyway, we did not need a unanimous decision or written notes. It was just, we felt that it made sense, and therefore we should go and accept it. We would also had another bond, which was unwritten. If any one of us was fired for what the rest would deem to be unfair, we would all quit instantly, from the Commissioner General down. the whole management team, the 6 of us, plus Miwasser, plus Strawn, plus Zipri, the 9 of us would walk out. Take your goddamn exhibition and shut it. It never came to being. I don't know if it would have worked. I don't know if everybody would have quit. I know I would, but the others might say, look, we can't leave them with that. You can always replace Jasmin or Shaw, or not easy to replace Shaw or Churchill or Beaubien, but Rediker, Jasmin, the Belfry, those are disposable. It was never put to test. I'm not sure that it would have worked that way, but it was a threat that nobody dared to challenge us on. So that's one question, which I think was earlier in your thing, and that's my answer to it.